Hi and welcome back to my blog Diabetes Together with me, Mark Irwin. I am very sorry that I didn't post anything for the past 2 days. I've been unwell and just simply couldn't bring myself to record a blog. But I'm back now and I have a very appropriate video since it is Hypo Awareness Week for type 1 diabetics and other types of diabetics. I thought I'd do it around hypos, and this video is going to go through my 5 top tips for managing and surviving hypos. Okay, tip number 1 is to be able to spot the signs and symptoms of a hypo, particularly if you are newly diagnosed. It might be very new to you. Sometimes hypos can just feel like hunger. Sometimes you can sit there with the symptoms and feel frustrated or angry and not know that you're actually hypo, because unfortunately one of the symptoms of having a hypo can be denial. I remember when I was a bit younger, about maybe 6 years ago, I was having a really bad hypo overnight. I was probably borderline unconscious, and my partner was trying to convince me that I was hypo, and I was denying that I was. So sometimes you can sit there just starting to feel frustrated or tired, or a headache comes on. You just don't know that you're hypo. So obviously recognising the symptoms and signs as early as possible. A hypo can be fatal, but when you learn to spot the symptoms, then it's really sort of easy to manage. You can quickly treat it, and then within sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes half an hour, very rarely maybe an hour, you can be back to your normal day. So spotting the symptoms is absolutely crucial in terms of treating and managing hypos, and obviously as new diabetics, that's equally as important as well. So look out for dizziness, headaches, tiredness, fatigue, really bad hunger, getting angry, just feeling really low in energy, like you can't function properly without eating anything. I always describe a hypo as sometimes really extreme hunger, like your body's just telling you to eat something now because you've got no energy whatsoever. So look out for that. It is on a very rare occasion you can have an hypo where you don't have any symptoms at all. Sometimes if I go to say 3.8, which is technically a hypo, or very close to becoming a hypo, I might not have any symptoms, and I've picked that up just through blood testing. So you need to make sure that you're obviously regularly testing, and that's one of the later tips. So yeah, spot the symptoms first of all, learn thoroughly what the symptoms are. Obviously if you don't get any symptoms when you're having hypos, that is something that's really serious, particularly if you're driving or in charge of any machinery or anything like that. So you should definitely go and speak to your hospital about that, and or your GP as a starting point, or your diabetic nurse, and they will obviously have some advice and guidance on what you can do there. So that is a dangerous situation to be in. If you've been diabetic for a number of years and you do frequently have hypos, you can start to not feel symptoms as well. So you need to be careful about that. So I'd go and speak to your health professional as soon as you possibly can. Tip number 2 is to check bloods regularly. Okay, it's nothing that is out of the ordinary for diabetics. You should be testing as much as you possibly can, because even if you've got superb control and you think I never have hypos and I'm never going to have a hypo today, no way. You just don't know, because a hypo can be caused by stress. It can be caused by just a slight overdose of insulin. You've taken slightly too much insulin with your meal, or you just had a more active day. A hypo can come on you regardless of how good your control is or how bad your control is. So you should always check your bloods. I do advise that you get yourself some form of blood meter that you can carry out with you, but I also recommend once again that you go to the Freestyle Libre and you nag your GP or your healthcare professional to allow you to go onto the Freestyle Libre. If you don't have symptoms of hypos, that could be time to go on a continuous glucose monitor. That's one of the things that allows you to be eligible for a CGM, and one of the things that allows you to be eligible for a Freestyle Libre is routine hypos, regular hypos, or sort of overnight hypos, or hypo unawareness. So the importance of testing your blood in terms of avoiding hypos. So if you test, let's say, your blood 2 hours after a meal and it says it's 5 millimoles per litre, I would then think possibly going to go low here, and might have another snack just to boost them blood sugars up, particularly if I'm at work or I'm doing sports as well, if I'm doing any running or cycling. But if you've got the Freestyle Libre, it's really good because you can then see the trend arrow as well. So if you scan yourself after your meal, 2 hours, 3 hours after your meal, and it's 5 or 6, but the arrow's pointing down, then you know you're going to have to go and sort of get something to eat or take a quick sort of sugary snack, and avoid that hypo altogether. The Freestyle Libre is really good because I've avoided possibly a couple of hypos that could have been serious by just checking my bloods and knowing that it's going down, and I've had a less sugary snack, a carby snack like a cereal bar, and that hypo hasn't happened then, and that's amazing. That's really good. So the Libre's invaluable, but always check your blood regularly so you can track what's going on. You see where you're going hypo each day, and you're spotting patterns and trends and figuring out why you're going hypo, so that helps you avoid them in the long term. Okay, tip number 3, arguably one of the most important things, whether you test your blood or have a BM meter with you or not. The most important thing about managing and treating a hypo is to carry things around with you no matter where you go. Even if you go out 5 minutes out the door, you carry something around with you. When I say carry something around with you, I'm talking about some form of treatment for a hypo. So I carry some of these dextro gel. I find these work really quickly because it's just pure glucose. You do need to have 2 tubes, 10 grams in each. So they do recommend 15 to 20 grams of carbohydrates. What does that look like? 4 jelly babies, 4 wine gums if you're just using sweets, or 2 tubes of this, or between 5 and 6 of these sometimes. So these are dextrose tablets, really cheap, 2 for £1 in Boots. I normally go in and buy 8 packs at a time. I'll keep 2 packs in my car, 2 packs in my diabetes day pack. I'll keep a pack at work, pack it in my pocket, a packet in the house. You just can't be prepared enough for a hypo. If you're going out on a walk, you should never go out without hypo treatment. If you're going to work, basically if you're anywhere, even if you're popping in the shop for 5 minutes, it could be a really quick flick to you being not hypo to being hypo. So the biggest piece of advice I could give you, as somebody who's been diabetic for a long time, is to always take something with you. It doesn't necessarily have to be hypo stop or dextro tablets, although I do find these very useful. It could just be a packet of jelly babies. Something like this. I got these from Aldi for I think 50-60 pence. When I go shopping, I throw 2 in the trolley now and then, and I do have a like a sort of packet in a sandwich bag as well for when I go on a run. Just grab them out and I can eat them on the run as well. Absolutely essential that you carry something around with you, because you could become really stuck. You know, a hypo is not a bad thing if you're prepared and you've got sweets with you. And you can quickly, if you notice that you're 3.2 on your blood meter, or you just feel hypo, then you can just quickly have 4 sweets, sit down for a minute, 10 minutes later, I think I feel a bit alright now, I'll go and get something long acting. One point I will say is that if you're on insulin pens, as in multiple daily injections, you are supposed to have a fast acting carb such as sweets, dextro tablets, hypo gel, and then a little bit later on, about 10, 15, 20 minutes later, test your sugars again and then have a longer acting carb, maybe 10 to 15, 20 grams of longer acting carb to keep the hypo from returning again. And I found that worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but if you are on long acting and short acting injections, it's supposed to be done, otherwise the hypo will just keep returning. Your long acting basal insulin dose will keep knocking your sugars down. If you're on a pump, you don't have to take a long-acting carb. You can just take those sugary sweets or hypo stop, and that will treat the hypo, and you could then potentially either reduce your basal dose, or the basal might be on a low enough dose not to make you go hypo again. So you don't need to have a long-acting carb necessarily after a hypo when you're on an insulin pump, but when you're on insulin pens, I would always possibly have maybe just a banana or something, maybe a little bit more sort of like crackers or a piece of toast, you know, just something that's going to keep your carbs up, because sugar doesn't do the work on its own when you're on multiple daily injections, so you do have to have something extra. Always carry your blood meter around with you as well, and insulin. So if you do over treat a hypo, it's very, very easy. I get up overnight sometimes, 2.3 on my blood meter, and I think we've all been there. We've had a hypo where you just want to eat the world. I have quite frequently before I went on the pump overnight. I'd wake up at 4 AM and I wanted to eat everything in the friggin' house. So basically what that then causes is your blood sugars just to go sky high, 19s and 20s, possibly higher, because of eating ice cream, of eating sweets, of eating biscuits, chocolate, crackers, loads of milk out the bottle. You know, disgusting behaviour, really nasty behaviour as a hypo treatment, but sometimes that's just what happens. So if you're out, make sure you take your insulin pen with you, because when you go high above 20s, you can make you feel even sicker than being hypo. So correcting your insulin after a hypo is quite important sometimes too. Tip number 4 is to spot your trends and adjust your insulin. If you're on an insulin pump, it becomes really easy with a continuous glucose monitor or a Freestyle Libre. It's really easy to spot trends. If you're on hypo 4 o'clock every day, the likelihood is it's either your bolus dose at lunchtime is too high, your carb ratio is not correct, you're miscalculating your carbs, or your basal dose is too high. I would err towards usually the basal dose first, and then possibly reduce, after a couple of days, reduce your bolus dose if you're finding that you're still going low. If it's after a meal, usually it is the bolus dose, but for me, I can go hypo 6 hours after a meal sometimes, so it's a little bit difficult to spot and sort of figure out what's going on, but one thing at a time. Change one thing at a time. Don't go changing the bolus and the basal at the same time, because if you do that, you're not going to know which one's worked and which one's not worked, and then you might end up the next day finding yourself that you're going to go high instead of going hypo, because you've adjusted both at the same time. So if you're going to make a change to your insulin, if you think I've spotted the fact that I'm going hypo at 4 o'clock every day, then do one thing at a time. Either reduce your basal for a few days, or reduce your bolus rate or your carb ratio for a few days. See how that goes, and after a few days review it again and then make another adjustment. If it hasn't worked, then it might be the fact that you might to either reduce, let's say you've increased you reduced your bolus, you might then think I'll reduce it again, or actually I'll leave it and then I'll reduce the basal and see if that makes a difference. And if that makes a difference, you know it's the basal and not the bolus dose. Okay, same if you're on insulin pens. I think it's a little bit more difficult because you've got a 24-hour basal dose, but again, if you could potentially reduce it by half a unit at a time, see if that makes any difference. Maybe perhaps change how much insulin you're giving yourself with your meals, how much bolus you're taking. It's all about avoiding hypos is the biggest part of being diabetic, because hypos are dangerous and they can also cause highs as well, and really bad HbA1c results as a result, because you're going to go low, high, and it could be everywhere. So tracking trends, looking for things happening on at the same time each day. So tracking trends and looking for what's going on in the day in a 24-hour period, sort of overnight. Particularly, you can go hypo overnight and stay hypo if you don't wake up. And it's just spotting those patterns. If I'm going low at 3 o'clock, I might reduce my basal dose on my pump for 1 o'clock, and then that might prevent that hypo. So it's all about looking for trends and avoiding and preventing hypos, and that will help you out and prevent you from having some uncomfortable times at work or uncomfortable times in just a regular day. There's nothing worse than a hypo. Okay, my last top tip, tip number 5, is if you are in doubt, treat it as a hypo. You may have gone out and you may not have any way of testing your blood, or your Freestyle Libre's give in, or your CGM's bust, or whatever it is, and you might not know. You might think, I don't know if I am hypo, I don't want to over-treat it because I'm going to go high, I'll just wait till my dinner, or I'll just have something later, I'll check later when I get home. Don't do that, because it's dangerous. If you think even for a second that you're hypo, even if it's just hunger, and you think I might be hypo, I might be slightly low, just treat it as a hypo. The worst comes to worst, you go a little bit high, and then when you get home you just test it and correct later on. You can't treat a hypo as something that's just, well, I'll get on with it, I'll do it later, because eventually if you carry on and you don't treat it, it'll become a really bad incident where you might collapse or go into a coma. You might even be on your own and nobody finds you. It's that serious. Hypos are very dangerous. So never ever treat a hypo as something you can just pass off and treat later. If you haven't got any way of testing your blood, obviously one of my tips today was to make sure you always carry a blood meter with you. Obviously, realistically, sometimes you might just not have any way of testing your blood. The batteries might have run out or things like that. It can happen, can't it? So always, if you feel like I'm slightly hypo, just treat it as a hypo. If I go on a run, sometimes I'll have my Freestyle Libre with me in the form of my phone, so I'll scan my phone on my Libre as often as I can and check my blood, and then I'll eat sweets as I'm running. Sometimes I'm running and I think I'm a little bit low here, I'm going to just stop and treat it. I know I'm hypo. You'll get used to it eventually. If you're just newly diagnosed, you might think I'm always going to have to test, but sometimes you just know that you're hypo and you just treat it and then get on with it occasionally. I always try and test if I can, but if I know that I'm going low, or I know that I'm having a hypo because I've been diabetic 24 years, I know the symptoms, then I'll just treat it. Sometimes it might just be hunger, but particularly if you're on a run or you're doing anything active, then it's no big deal, because you need sugar or a sugary snack anyway while you're running to keep your blood sugars up sometimes. So I mean, I think it's an important thing to say is if you really feel like you can't test your blood but you think you might be having a hypo, just treat it. And then the worst comes to worst, you've got a couple of hours of high blood sugars and you just correct when you get home. It's no big deal. So always be on the safe side in terms of testing your hypos and making sure that you know to treat it, sort of, even if you're not 100% sure, because it just avoids any complications such as collapsing or going into a coma. Worst case scenario, of course, but that can happen if you don't treat it seriously. One final point, I think just need to be aware of the Freestyle Libre. My experiences with it so far, after over a year now of being on it, is that it doesn't really give an accurate result with hypos. It will tell you that you're hypo when you are hypo, and it usually is right, and the symptoms kind of line up. So if I'm hypo, I'll scan it and I'll say 3.8, but it doesn't act quickly in terms of showing you how hypo you are or what length the hypo is. So I've scanned before and I've been 3.2. I thought, okay, I'll just treat it and I'll track again, and I've scanned about half an hour later and it says 2.7. Because your blood sugar's changing so rapidly when you've had a hypo, because you've gone from, you have to go from 5.6 to 3.2, and then you've taken some sugary snacks and you've gone right back up. The Libre takes some time to catch up with that because it's not actually monitoring your blood sugar, it's monitoring the glucose that's in your interstitial fluid in your blood cells. So it's behind what your blood sugar is. So sometimes you might check your Freestyle Libre and it'll say 2.7, but then you check your blood and it might say 7.2. That is something you need to track and monitor yourself. Make sure you test your blood if you're not sure, just to be doubly sure that you're treating the hypo correctly, and you're not then going to say, oh, I'm 2.7 now, I'll have to have more sugar, and then you'll end up finding that you're going to go really high. So just be careful with the Freestyle Libre in terms of checking hypos. It's not the most accurate for hypos, and when your blood sugar's rapidly changing, it takes some time to catch up, and it will eventually get there. It's just that it's delayed in terms of your blood sugar. So how much glucose in your blood is different to what's in your interstitial fluid. It eventually travels into the interstitial fluid. I'll probably do a video on that at some point. So yeah, there's my top 5 tips for managing and surviving hypos as a type 1 diabetic or any other type of diabetes. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will be back tomorrow with a little short video because I'm getting a tattoo today. It's big slap bang type 1 diabetic tattoo on my arm there, with the diabetes blue international diabetes logo around it. And the reason I'm getting that is because I want to have some type 1 diabetic identification on me so that people know that I'm diabetic in case of an incident. I did used to wear a bracelet around my wrist, but I keep losing them and they keep breaking. So I'm going to do a short video on that tomorrow. I'll show you the tattoo, and I'll go through why it's important to carry ID around with you since it's Hypo Awareness Week. That is one of the reasons why. So thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, give us a thumbs up as usual, and if you could kindly put a comment up, let me know what you thought, or disagree with anything I said, or add to what I've said as well. That'd be amazing. I'd love to have a chat with people on YouTube comments. Also get over to Twitter at T1D Together and see what I'm doing over there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.